Hello, and welcome to the Scouse Science podcast. My name is Professor Tom Solomon. I'm here at the University of Liverpool, and this is my guest today, beg your pardon, Professor MacArdle, who we can see there on the screen, and Jim Moxon, who is the Liverpool Football Club doctor, who we are at the moment unable to see on the screen because we have some minor technical glitches. And then we also have, of course, our Scouse scientist, Holly Ellis. So everyone say hello, please.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Now, Anne is actually in Florida in the USA. And of course, it brings to mind the famous Houston, we have a problem. So this time, it's not Houston with the problem or Florida with the problem. It's actually just the local link from Anfield. But never mind, we have had some technical challenges before. And this time, I think we're going to proceed, unfortunately, without Jim's beautiful face. And he did say that he'd shaved, especially for the program. So never mind. But anyway, welcome, everybody. And thanks for your patience whilst we just sorted out our technical challenges. Today's Scouse Science podcast is all about muscle. But first of all, we have a little bit of housekeeping. So as always, you, our audience, can chat to us via the Zoom function or via Facebook chat. And we know people like to do this. We always like to check it's working. So please just type in now and say hello, say where you're from, tell us whether you're a first timer or a repeat offender. And then today's question, we always like to have a question for people to post into the chat. And I think today's question is going to be, have you cancelled Christmas yet? Is that too depressing a question?
I think that's a bit depressing, Tom.
Right, okay. I was trying to think of a clever question relating to muscle, but I couldn't think of one. Maybe I know. What about which is your favourite muscle to use and why? There we are, that's better. So are you a first timer? Where are you listening from? And which is your favourite muscle and why? And whilst those comments come in, and we can see some of them coming flying in now, this is great. Roger Phillips is a repeat offender. In fact, I think Roger's a long-term offender. He, of course, is from BBC Radio Merseyside. He's in France at the moment. Bonjour, he says. Thank you. Let's see who else we have. Paul Hayward. Christmas not cancelled yet. Good. Dr. Darlington is in South Wirral with some students at the high school there, joining for the first time. That's great. Thank you, Dr. Darlington, for joining along with your students. Please keep sending those messages in, everybody. It's great to see where people are listening from. This is about our 16th or 17th Scouse Science podcast. I can't remember how many, but we've had some fabulous ones in the past. If you missed our chat with Edwina Curry and Rick Williams about climate change, then you can go onto your usual podcast provider and have a listen. And whilst you're there, you can rate, review and subscribe. And our rating is fantastic. We're almost at 5 complete stars. I think we are at 5 stars. So keep doing that, please. And tell a friend that you love the podcast and get them to join us next time. But anyway, it's time for me to introduce our guests properly. First of all, remotely, we have Jim Moxon, Jim, can you hear me okay? Let's just check you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you absolutely fine.
Okay, and you can hear Holly and the team and everyone else okay?
Yeah,
good.
All good.
And Holly, can you hear Jim?
Yes, fine.
It's working. All right, I'll relax. Jim was born locally at Wiston Hospital and moved to Blackpool, went on to study in Sheffield, firstly geography, and then he transferred to medicine. And he would have been very happy just to be the first doctor in his family and just to be a normal doctor. But as I understand it, one day when he was training a trainee doctor, the doctor he was with covered some football matches and was the doctor at matches. And Jim, I think he couldn't go and asked you if you would cover a game of Sheffield Wednesday against the Man United Academy. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So he knew I was, I absolutely loved football. You know, I played football all the time, watched football all the time. And he very casually said, oh, I can't make it, but can you go along to the Sheffield Wednesday training ground and cover the Sheffield Wednesday Academy under-18s game? The rest is history after that.
The rest is history. We'll come back to more history in a minute. But meanwhile, let me also introduce Professor MacArdle, who also was born and grew up in Liverpool. So we have for the first time ever, we have 4 well, I'm not a Scouser really. We have 2 Scouse guests and Holly, so I think that's one of our highest compliments of Scousers. And Anne also was, I think, the first in her family to go to university. Is that right, Anne?
It's first generation.
First generation, yeah. And you were also very interested in sport at school and took every opportunity to become an athlete. Did you ever try soccer, football?
No, unfortunately not. It wasn't really encouraged in the convent school that I went to, no.
What sport did you take up? What were you interested in?
So track athletics, really. I was a hurdler and sprinter when I was younger.
And then you became a scientist. I think you got support from your family and from your teachers. And once you became a scientist, you were here at Liverpool. And as soon as you could, you got involved in studying muscle. Is that right?
It is. The background to my sport really encouraged me to get involved in that sort of research. It was what attracted me to the studies.
And what I haven't said, of course, the observant of you will notice that Anne is in a lab. She's in, as I mentioned, in Florida. She's actually in the NASA labs because she's in the middle of an experiment where she's sending some muscle up to space. And we'll hear more about the science of the experiment in a minute or two. But just in terms of sending your muscles into space, what's the plan? When is it going? And when's the countdown going to begin?
So the plan is that you'll see the team arrive in this lab probably over the next hour or so. And so the muscles are being grown as we speak. They're in the incubators. They will be integrated into the units that go up onto the rocket on Saturday. And then the rocket is hopefully going to launch on the 21st, on Tuesday.
Right, great. And you've said, though, that that's contingent on a few things lining up, one of which is the Russians clearing their garbage. Is that right?
That's one of the things, yeah. There are limited ports on the International Space Station, so the ports that are occupied need to be freed and so on. So there is quite a lot of strategy involved, led by NASA.
Right, great. Now, so just back to Jim. So at the moment, Jim, we've got you've just done your first match, Sheffield Wednesday against Man United. And that, I think, was your first taster for sports medicine. And then you spent some time at the Olympics, particularly at the swimming and the diving venue.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's right. So, in 2012, I was in the Aquatic Centre. So I got to see the swimming, the diving, and I think there's a bit of synchronized swimming even thrown in. But that was a fantastic experience. It's something I really love getting involved with. So, that was that kind of steered me down the line of wanting to do a bit more training on the sports medicine side of things. Yeah,
and then so back to football. You spent some wilderness years with Chesterfield FC and Sheffield United. And then got even more lost in rugby league. And then,
well, I was kind of spinning lots of plates at once, actually. So I knew that I just needed to get as much experience as possible. So I would work for Chesterfield FC, and I loved it. And then moved on to Sheffield United. And then at the same time, I worked for a couple of rugby teams because basically, doing 5 games of rugby, you see more injury and more kind of difficult things to manage than kind of 4 seasons in football. So it was a really valuable experience, actually.
Yeah. And then you hit gold, and you've been at Liverpool for 6 years, but only the first team for about the last 18 months. And I first met you when you phoned me at the start of the pandemic and said, again, Houston, we have a problem. What do you remember our initial chats?
Yeah, I mean, they were. It was such a difficult time, wasn't it? And people just didn't really know what was going to happen. What's the best thing to do? It was, and obviously we weren't as far as we were with testing, and I rang you because I was just like, I need someone to help me here, and it was really, really helpful.
Yeah, and it's been interesting for me as well to think about different aspects to the pandemic and how we look after a team of athletes and keep them protected, and ensure that they can continue doing their job. And of course, things have got a little bit hot again recently. You and I chatted the other day about footballers being vaccinated, and we know nationally it's not been as great as it might be, but I think the numbers for Liverpool are quite impressive.
Yeah, we've placed a lot of emphasis on it. We've done a lot of work right through from our 12 to 16-year-olds. We have kind of sent messages to say, look, we really encourage you to get on board with what they're doing at school, in the community. Then we've kind of facilitated our 16 to 23-year-olds. So obviously we access the NHS for them and just help to encourage them and set them up with appointments. And then with the first team, we've got very high vaccination rates. And obviously with the booster kind of being available now, we've jumped on board with that. Obviously that's got logistical issues of trying to, turn up with the first team somewhere for the vaccinations isn't always straightforward.
Yeah. But I think in terms of the primary course, it's nearly 100%, isn't it?
Yeah, we're getting towards 100%, which is a fantastic effort by everyone, really.
Yeah, it's great. I kind of think more people need to know that. But anyway, and have the local or recent problems affected your plans at all?
Yes, obviously there were the additional tests that we needed to undertake to come out here. And they changed at the very last minute when the United States changed to a 1 day prior to travel testing. So we were all isolated for quite a while before we flew, just to make sure that we could come out and meet the deadlines here. Yeah. But once we're here, there's testing before we can come into the NASA facilities, obviously. But once we're here, we're relatively safe.
Great, yeah, and it's fabulous that you are there. So you better tell us all a little bit more about this. Why on earth you're sending muscle up into space?
So first of all, I'd like to thank you, Tom, for giving us the invitation to tell you about our exciting project. We're interested in...
First time anyone's ever thanked me on the podcast, so there you go. Carry on.
Our research team for quite some time has been interested in why we lose our muscle as we age and how we might be able to impact on that. And there are relatively few interventions that will even allow us to maintain some muscle as we age. Now, we all know that astronauts lose their muscle mass at an accelerated rate. So you'll see them, they can't walk very well. They're chairlifted from the capsules and so on. And so what that does is provides a unique model to rapidly identify the mechanisms of muscle loss, not only in astronauts, but also with relevance to older people on Earth. So what we're doing is we're sending up mini muscles. So they're grown from human muscle cells and produce mini muscles about just short of 1 centimeter long. And we're going to, it's been quite a feat to get through the technology to get this up into the size of space we have on the International Space Station. We're going to send them up and we're going to contract them, going to make them exercise basically, and look at the way they respond to exercise. And we think what we'll see is that the muscles in microgravity will behave very much like an accelerated aging model. And so that will really provide us with a model to be able to rapidly develop interventions that will have relevance here to all people on Earth. This is the team just arriving here behind me.
That's good to see the team. We know you for real. We all know, of course, the main reason why Jim's not able to turn his camera on is because he's got 22 members of the Liverpool squad standing behind him. They all want to listen in. They all want to join the podcast. But we couldn't get the contract arranged with their agents to work out how much money we had to pay them all. But we can see the team assembling, and the issue really is, isn't it, that we know in old people muscle wastes away, and your program overall is to try and understand that so that we can do something about it. But of course, to study muscle in old people, to study it wasting away, takes years and years. And whereas when these astronauts go up, their muscle wastes away in a number of weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So to study old muscle loss with old age, well, there's a couple of ways we lose muscle as we age. We lose complete muscle cells called fibers, and the ones that are left atrophy. And so we can hypertrophy those muscle cells that are left, but we don't really understand why the fibers are lost completely. So we can only intervene in some way.
Just to jump in, sorry. So atrophy is when muscle fibers get smaller and waste away. And hypertrophy is what happens when you use your muscles, exercise, and they get bigger and fatter.
That's right. Yeah. And so that happens over decades and really doesn't allow us the time to develop interventions into that process is really difficult. So if we've got an accelerated model here in microgravity, it will really move the research on at a much faster rate.
I'm just wondering, so clearly this is about, ultimately it's strengthening muscles of older people to stop them wasting away. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking on the sports side, and of course we know athletes occasionally do things to strengthen their muscles, don't they? You know, why I don't know what they do. I guess they take steroids, do they? Jim, what's everybody doing? I mean, what's nobody doing down at Anfield? But what do we have to stop athletes doing? They get tested, of course, but what are the tests they have, and what are they looking for to stop people cheating?
Yeah. Certainly, nobody takes steroids, but we have a very strict anti-doping program. So most games we have someone come to the game afterwards and select 2 players randomly for urine and often blood tests on top. So much so that sometimes guys will play at the weekend in the Premier League, get selected for doping, and then we play in UEFA in Champions League, and it's a completely different doping program, and they might even select the same person. So this you do get poor players who basically had to sit around and have their blood taken twice within 2 days for a doping test. And obviously the last thing you can do after you've played 95 minutes of football is do a wee. So, you know, there's often a lot of waiting around whilst the rest of your teammates are kind of celebrating and getting changed in the changing room. So it's not always the nicest experience for the players, but it is very important and it's done very well.
So here's my question. If we know how to strengthen muscle, athletes know how to do that. Obviously they're not allowed to. And why aren't we just using those approaches on our frail old people?
So older people have what we call anabolic resistance. They develop a resistance to being able to build muscle. And that's really the process that we need to, part of the process that we need to understand. So as you've said, when you're younger, if you're a young footballer, you can really make your muscles a lot bigger very rapidly, particularly with resistance type exercise. Older people, when they undertake that sort of exercise, have this resistance to making the muscles bigger. We can get there, and you know, you can train them to have some effects, and that's the only intervention we really have for older people right now. But it's far from optimal, so we don't understand why right now.
Okay. Well, we've got Holly Ellis, of course, our Scouse scientist, is always keeping an eye on the chat, Facebook and on Twitter. Holly, what's been happening out there in the world?
Hi, Tom. So yeah, we've got loads of comments coming in on Zoom and Facebook. So I'll just encourage everyone to continue asking questions. So some people are answering your question about what the favourite muscle is.
Oh,
so
good. Yeah, let's hear.
Catherine Williams has said leg muscles are the most important. Someone said the chuckle muscle, and someone else said the myocardium. Somebody else on Zoom said the orbicularis oris, which I didn't know what that was, so I just Googled it, and they said it was the kissing muscle is what the person's called it on Zoom, but yeah, so lots of different.
I thought you said oculus, orbicularis. Oculus is the eye, isn't it, for winking? But oris is kissing. I think that's right. The mouth. Yeah,
that's what they said. So that's a lot of people's favourite muscle, apparently. So a few questions coming in. So Dan Wotton on Zoom is asking Jim, which hall was he in? Because I'm guessing that he must have gone to Sheffield Med School with him. And also about another question for Anne from the same person, saying, is your research focused on skeletal muscle and what happens to the myocardium in space?
Lots of the tissue, so yes, we are focused on skeletal muscle. There are effects on all tissues in space, so not just myocardium, but eyes, to all tissues, so brain, whatever. So there are different groups researching those different tissues.
And just for the benefit of the non-medics, so skeletal muscle is the muscle in your arms and legs, isn't it? And myocardium is the heart muscle. And Jim, do you want to reveal to everyone in the world which hall you in? Can you remember? Did you come across a troublemaker called? Go on then.
So no, I was in Stevenson Hall, which was in a beautiful area of the city, just near Hunters Bar roundabout, Broomhill. I had a great time there. Absolutely loved it. We had Stevenson Hall football team, and no, it was definitely some of the best days of my life. I loved it there. It's
a good university, isn't it? Dan better tell us. Where does Dan was at? I can't read a word of it. Something about drinking. Yeah, my niece was in the SPEP in the drinking team. Moving on.
So while we've got Jim there, Pauline Briggs wants to know: is he a combined Sheffield Wednesday fan and Liverpool fan? That's something that she's managed to combine the two.
Well, listen, this is controversial. So when I've always loved actually going to watch football. So when I was a youngster, I only got to watch Liverpool a few times when we came to visit my brothers who were living in St Helens. And it would be like the most amazing thing going to watch a Liverpool game. But in those days, like going from Blackpool to Liverpool, people, it wasn't quite the same. People didn't quite do that as much as they might do now. We've got people coming from Vancouver for the football match now. And so when I was old enough, I started to go and watch Blackpool. So I loved watching Blackpool because it was like my local team. But I still, had a soft spot for Liverpool and went when I could. And then when I went to University of Sheffield, I actually got a season ticket at Sheffield United because I wanted to go and watch the team nearest to where I live. So I had to go to Sheffield Wednesday and then kind of quietly under my breath say, well, actually, I'm going to go and watch Sheffield United this afternoon. But yeah, when you work for a team, you can't help but support them. You just become part of it, and you want them to win. You get to know the players, and, everything is about kind of the team and the team doing well. So yeah, that's me and my wife's like, you've got about 5 teams that you look out for the results for. But yeah, that's how things have been.
Oh.
So nobody's going to mention Everton, of course.
Well, Anne, we don't want to punish you. You said you were excited on the podcast, and we didn't want to make you feel too miserable.
That's a topic of contention in my house, with me being a Liverpool fan and my husband being an Evertonian as well. So I'm not allowed to mention that at home either. Have we got time for another question?
I can properly remember that I got excited about and actually knew what was happening was the 1986 Cup final. And I did the whole thing of getting up at 9 a.m. and just the build up. And that was the first game that I properly remember the whole thing. So, yeah, Liverpool-Everton's always been a special game.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just feed in one more question, which is from Louise Ellman, again, a friend of the show, wants to know about the timescale for your research, Anne.
The research at the Kennedy?
Yeah, I think I'm guessing so.
Okay.
And then also the longer timescale. All
right. So what happens with the research at the Kennedy is that we send the muscles up to the space station, hopefully on the 21st of December, or at least hopefully before Christmas if there are any delays. Sorry, before the end of the year, if there are any delays. The experiment's undertaken, and then it's dropped into a -80 freezer up there, and then returned to us within a month or two. The results from it will be really quick. The analysis back in the lab, as soon as we get the samples back, will be relatively quick. And so the outcome of the results we'd hope to have certainly next year out in publication. So watch this space, I think, for that. In terms of our wider research, we're continuing. We have lots of other projects looking at the mechanisms of muscle loss with aging particularly. And so we've got outcomes from that on multiple, so we're interested in the effects of nutrition on loss of muscle, obviously the effect of resistance exercise and so on. So publications as usual, really, but over the next few years.
Yeah, and so this first experiment is really for you just to see if when you send muscle up into space, it behaves in a way, it atrophies, it wastes in a way which is comparable with what happens naturally in humans, isn't it? And then if that is the case, then you've got an experimental system. Does it mean then, as you know the disease process and possible treatments, that you will, you know, if it works, you'll have to be sending more and more stuff up into space, because that's your model, as it were.
It is, yes. So we've got some, within the experiment that's going up this time, we've got some sort of proof of principle of potential mechanisms or potential therapies to protect against the atrophy. So if we do see atrophy in the normal mini muscles, we've also got some that are overexpressing one particular protein that we know is protective. And so it'll be really interesting to see if that's protected those muscles in microgravity, because we know that there's some protection in old age as well with that protein. And there are drugs available that can induce that protein. They're in very early stage at the moment. So that's some of the parallel work that we're undertaking as well on the Earth.
Yeah, it's very exciting. We'll keep posting your questions and comments, and we'll to the audience, and we'll hear more of them from Holly a little bit later on. You talked about muscle strength and power, and these are different things, aren't they?
Is that directed to me, Tom? Or?
Yeah, or Jim, actually, maybe Jim. Strength versus power. I was trying to make sense of this the other day. Are you able to give us a simple explanation?
Well, I suppose your strength is the absolute ability to overcome a resistance. You know, whereas power is how quickly you can generate that kind of force to overcome the resistance. So there is a difference. When we think about kind of, you know, power and strength in players, we think about the dynamic situations they get themselves into on the pitch, where you are simultaneously, if you watch some of our best players holding off an opponent whilst you know, taking a ball that's been kicked in the air onto your chest and then turning. So, you know, traditionally people think about, you know, lifting heavy weights with your arms, but actually we look to, you know, do they have strength, and are they powerful in various positions on the football pitch that they get themselves into? So yeah, that's the kind of when we think about how our players are.
And how do you strengthen that? How, you know, how do you enhance that strength overall? And I know exactly what you mean. You might have somebody who's really strong at picking up weights, but actually when somebody's bowling into them from the back, they just bowl over. How do you make players stronger in that way?
Yeah, the guys, they always do a gym session before they train. They're always working in different positions where someone will be you might have someone kind of applying a stress to the body whilst they are kind of maintaining their kind of position. So I don't know, you might, if you use like a TRX cord, we call them, that has kind of tension on that. So you have to kind of hold the TRX card in the best position still whilst someone is almost knocking you, so that you have to kind of maintain your position. So it's using those smaller, maybe smaller muscles that kind of you wouldn't traditionally think about people doing bicep curls and shoulder press. It's not that at all. And that enables them to maintain their body position under stress, that then allows them to take a magnificent pass from one of our best centre halves onto their chest, and then hold the player off and turn and go. So that's what we work a lot on, and that's what all clubs are doing, really.
So you've got one of your players sort of a pull cord, you said. So it's basically they've got like an elastic cord pulling them back, and they have to maintain that position.
They might have to hold that in a particular position, whilst you might have a member of staff maybe have a big Swiss ball and knock them with it, and they have to kind of hold their position. So that is a classic way of kind of building that type of strength in a person.
Mm. And we were talking the other day about how for strengthening old people, it's less about, because I wondered whether, you know, I do a bit of running, and whether, in fact, you said something really interesting, which is that if we think about the athletes compared to everybody else, because athletes have a bigger bulk of muscle to begin with, their muscles will waste over time like everybody else's, but because they've got more to start with, they'll be stronger for longer, I think you said. Have I remembered that correctly?
That's correct. So yes, I mean, if you're a veteran athlete, you've got more muscle than somebody of your age who's relatively sedentary. But even those veteran athletes lose muscle mass at the same rate as someone who's sedentary. It just means that they've managed to make their muscles as big as possible. They've hypertrophied those muscle fibers they've got left. Whereas, so if you're older, you can actually, in principle, you should be able to hypertrophy those muscles to take you back maybe 10 or 20 years in terms of muscle function. The best sort of exercise for old age is a resistance exercise, so to build muscle up. I mean, undoubtedly all exercise is good for us, and so but in old age, resistance exercise is particularly good for us.
Because you told me I was wasting my time with my running speech. I don't know if you were considering me as being in the old age group yet, but
not quite. And just going back to Jim's point as well, we preferentially lose the fast muscle. So in muscle we have muscle cells that are fast and some that are slow, and we preferentially lose the fast ones as we age. So that means that the older you get, the less responsive you are. So, you know, if you trip, it's very hard to right yourself when you trip, so you fall more and so on. So those high burst energy responses go really with old age.
And when you were talking about resistance, I think these are the kind of big rubber bands that people put on legs to.
Ideally weightlifting, but it doesn't need to be bodybuilding weights. You could get, you know, a can of beans in your arm and lift that while you're sitting watching the TV or so on, depending on how strong you are. But yeah, the resistance bands that you can get readily in all of the sort of sports shops or online. Yeah.
And sports, science is really clearly having a big impact in many ways. I mean, in terms of the football, Jim, I guess, you know, when I was a kid, we used to come down and watch the players and meet them a little bit if I was lucky. I don't think in terms of training there'd be anything like the sort of scientific input there is now. We were down at Melwood not long ago, and, you know, I was amazed. Everybody's strapped up, having everything measured. At the end of the training session, a couple of them it was almost like racehorses. They had to go and do a bit extra because they hadn't quite reached their targets. I mean, in what other ways is science impacting on what happens in the training apart from with muscle and power?
Yeah, gosh, where do you start? Because sports science and Premier League football teams, it's a huge area. So I think one of the main things is to look at, has someone recovered? You know, are they ready to go again? Because the thing is, like, if you look at the schedule now, it's 2 games a week. And the crucial thing is, what we discover is everybody seems to recover at a different rate. So, surprise, surprise, we're not all exactly the same. You might find that some players recover very, very quickly. They don't seem to have the same issues with lots of muscle aching, whereas other players, you know, might find that they take an extra day to recover. And that's really important for us to find out. So the sports science, we call them the fitness department, actually, they spend a lot of time getting what we call objective markers off the players as well. So yeah, that is really relevant at the moment, because obviously if you see all these games getting cancelled, what's going to happen is probably they're going to be shoehorned into an even smaller period of time. And, you know, we need to think about, are we putting players who aren't fully recovered from their last game back into another game, and will that increase their rate of injury or not?
Yeah, and it's going to be, it's a very challenging time coming up again, I suspect. How do you find it, Jim? I mean, you're down there, you know, you've got a job to do. We see you racing on the pitch when one of them trips over or breaks a toenail or something like that. They're certainly a bit more frail compared to the rugby players, aren't they? But how do you find it? You know, you've got a job to do, but then also you're a fan watching the game. I mean, do you ever find yourself so involved in the game that, you know, there's a couple of them have fallen over and they're you know, not getting the attention they need?
Less so nowadays. I think when I started out, I got caught out once with a rugby match where they were attacking a line. It was a really exciting game, and I was kind of all enthralled in, will we score a try or not? And then a physio kind of punched me in the arm because one of the players was actually down near the halfway line, and I was so focused on us scoring the try. But yeah, you kind of, I think what helps is the fact that we now have so much TV coverage. So on the bench, if you notice, I've got an iPad there. So if you ever watch during the game, if there's an incident, what I've learned to do is kind of almost let the play carry on and see what's happening one step back. So now I've got to look much better at being a bit more calm, except when we score, is to check the iPad, rewind, and just have a good look at what actually happened in that incident. Because that's where you get your nuggets of information that can really, really help. We can see, did they twist their ankle there? Did they injure their knee? What's going on? So, yeah, I've learned to kind of just be able to step back and just kind of look a stage back when play is carrying on. But yeah, I mean, it is exciting. You can't help kind of getting carried away with it. But as a doctor, we kind of have to have that side where actually we need to kind of prioritize the player's welfare, not just, winning away at wherever. So I've kind of learned when to rein it in, when to stay calm, and certainly having the computer technology with the TV massively helps.
Do you think footballers are a bit soft compared to rugby players?
What's the next question?
Okay, no, we'll move on.
Listen, everyone is different, and I don't think you can compare, to be honest, because the sports are so different. Their structures, their lifestyles, the history, it's completely different. So, yeah, I don't think it's a fair comparison at all to say that.
No.
I know plenty of footballers who play through things and they just never complain of anything. So, yeah, I would say it's probably slightly unfair, maybe a bit of a misconception, I would say. That means everyone will be like, oh, well done, Jim at work.
What do you think, Anne? Are football players soft compared to rugby players?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just going to walk into the training ground tomorrow. So
yeah. I know, because I know several of the team are big listeners to the podcast. So you've got to stay politically correct, of course. Now, Anne, exactly. Anne is sporting. Jim, you can't see, but the rest of the world can see that Anne is sporting a wonderful badge as part of her work outfit, and of University of Liverpool, of course. But you've got did you bring one of those as well, just to hold up?
I did, yes.
Yeah, so this is called the Mission Patch. Tell us about the Mission Patch, please, Anne. And for those that can't, I better put it up again. I better describe it, because, of course, the podcast is audio only. So what we're looking at is it's the patch that goes up with every mission. And we can see it's drawn by a kid. There's an astronaut holding some weights and building up their strength. It says Micro Age Mission, University of Liverpool. So just tell us a bit about that, Anne.
So you'll also notice that it has the skyline around the world from Liverpool as well. So we set out a competition. So, I mean, we have an extensive outreach program, and outreach is really close to our heart here at the university, particularly aiming to reach those difficult to reach children who wouldn't necessarily be taken to the museums and so on. But it was a competition that we announced, and it went worldwide. Actually, we had entries from as far as India, for example. So we have 24 containers going up to the International Space Station, with each of them with 3 muscle constructs in. And so we had a call for children under the age and young adults under the age of 16 to design our mission patch for us. And we shortlisted 24 of those, which will all be stuck onto, or have already been stuck onto, these containers, and they will go to the space station. And so the children and young adults who design them can follow their mission patch up to the space station and back down. We then had a judge involved to judge the overall winner. And Jessica, age 9, was the overall winner. And she designed our patch that you're seeing now. It was given over to a graphic designer who didn't do too much with it. Actually, it was an excellent patch to start off with. And so that patch is what we have here. And it's gone on to all of our paperwork around the labs here in NASA. It's displayed up with the astronauts in the space station as well.
Brilliant.
So a really great, I mean, it's hard for us to engage with children about aging and exercise to some extent, but if you mention space, they're chomping at the bit to get involved. So it's a really good way of getting the message across to children.
And I think there's an app, isn't there, for people who want to follow the progress of the mission?
There is. We've just launched an app which you can find for both Apple and Android. If you search for MicroAge Mission, and you'll see the image from the patch as well on there, so you'll get the right one.
That's great. Now, Holly, come back and tell us I can see there's been lots more chat and discussion about all sorts of things.
Yeah, so there's loads of questions coming in. So a good question from Roger Phillips to Anne is, how hard was it to get your experiments accepted by NASA? It's really, so the experiment is funded by the UK Space Agency, and they are absolutely outstanding at supporting us at every step through the process. It's a competitive application like any application, and so it will meet strategy for the Space Agency and also for the UK science base in general. So aging is a really important part of our strategy to try and improve function. So yeah, it's a competitive process. Supported by the UK Space Agency and working through ESA. So we go through the European Space Agency then, who work directly with NASA. So NASA accept the experiments that are put forward then, as long as they tick all of the very difficult boxes to tick in terms of particularly safety for the astronauts on the ISS, which is paramount. And then what we might learn from those experiments as well is very important. Great, thanks, Anne. A question for Jim. What sort of recovery patterns do you see in players recovering from viral infections?
Ooh. Yeah, this is a really good point, actually, because there is some work going on that we wonder whether when people get viral infections, are they then likely to go on to get a muscle injury? So, yeah, the thing about viral illnesses, it's so common, isn't it? I mean, especially during the winter months, so many people have a viral upper respiratory tract infection. And, you know, if you go and see your GP, then, or you ring the NHS, actually, it's always the same advice, isn't it? Rest, you know, paracetamol, and it does go away. I suppose that for us, we are looking at kind of more novel ways of kind of, can we detect viruses in the early stages? Is there any special kind of things we can put into place? So if we detect that someone has got a viral infection, is there anything we can change? Can we change their training pattern? Can we change their kind of nutritional supplements? So there's lots of work going on in the background to do that. We're always trying to push at the edge of research around these things, just to maximize recovery and maximize kind of player availability and player health and welfare. So yeah, I would say that the problem is a lot of the conventional blood tests like a CRP will often be normal in viral illness. So we can't even really use those often because it's not really a helpful tool. So often it's kind of getting the objectives off the player, listening to how they are telling us how they are feeling, and then thinking, you know, how much do we need to do in training? Can we maximize their recovery in another way?
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks, Jim. We've got time for a couple quick questions, Tom, or are we out of
going,
time?
Keep going. You keep going. I'll stop you when the dates come.
Okay, so one for Anne. Can we use strategies for athletes such as steroids and other things for astronauts as a sort of way of protecting them, I suppose?
Potentially not steroids, but I think there are potential drugs. We don't really understand much about the muscle loss yet. And I think if we can get to the mechanisms by which the muscle's being lost, and we do have some pointers, particularly around the energy providing part of the muscle cells, so the mitochondria. If we can target the dysfunction that happens there, then there may be other drugs that we can use, depending on whether we see, and hopefully we'll see this anabolic resistance that we see in old age as well, and will really have an impact on both.
Great, thanks, Anne. And another question that's sort of linked to that is, apart from bulk, are there any other effects on the muscles in space?
the muscle will atrophy, so it does get smaller. So there's a change in muscle bulk. There is a potential that there's an inflammatory environment developing. So you see, if muscle atrophies, then it also produces some pro-inflammatory cytokines that aren't really good for the rest of the body as well. And we're looking at that too. We're looking to see whether our muscle cells release these cytokines. And that's something we see in old age as well. So maybe that you'd normally see after an infection, a big inflammatory response, but you see that all the time in old age. And we think that that's what we'll see in space as well.
Great. And then this question could be for anyone really. So what do we think about Pilates and yoga, which are more about balance and stretching rather than absolute strength?
Let's start with Jim on that one. Jim, do we have, I can just see Mo Salah doing a little bit of Pilates and yoga. Do you have all the players doing that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, often players will do things away from the training ground now because there's so much out there, isn't there? You've got the Peloton stuff you can do at home. But no, Pilates and yoga is excellent because what we want mobile, athletic, players who are strong in various positions, don't we? That's what we want. So anything that we can do to achieve that, yoga and Pilates are excellent ways of doing that. So a lot of the players do those things. And I do think they do make a big difference. So it's kind of, what you need to strip it all back and think, what would you want your footballers to be? You want them to be robust against injury. You want them to be have an excellent range of movement. You want them to be strong in lots of power in lots of positions, but you want them to be explosive and fast. So anything that we can do to do that is an advantage. So yoga and Pilates is one of those.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, Holly, we've got time for one last question, I think.
Okay, last quick question for Anne is, are your samples launched from the Kennedy or elsewhere?
They're launched from the Kennedy, yes, from pad 39A here at the Kennedy Space Station. So we will hopefully see them take off either from the Kennedy itself or from one of the beaches nearby.
Fantastic, very exciting. And will you, if these experiments continue and like we say, it becomes a very important model, will you at some stage be going up yourself to the Space Centre to conduct this?
So I would love to. I think highly unlikely, but these cells that we send up are immortalized human cells. And certainly the program lead, Malcolm Jackson, would be very keen to give a biopsy to at least send his muscle cells up, I'm sure.
Because these cells originated in Paris, I think you told me the other day.
They did, right? Yeah. So we have stem cells in our muscles that repair our muscles as they get damaged. And so the footballers that we're talking about, if they get injured, those stem cells will rebuild their muscles. So what we can do is take a biopsy, take some of those stem cells out and grow our muscles in culture. That's exactly what the team are doing here right now. That's great, thanks. Is that your team behind you then? It is, yeah. I'm sure they could all come in actually. And get them to come and say hello briefly. Say hello. Because we want to thank them. Just come and stand behind. They're reluctant. Anyway. No, they're busy. They're busy. They're busy. They're working. But we do want to thank them and you for your work and wish you good luck with all of that. It's really exciting. We want to wish the team, Jim, you and the Liverpool Football Club team, all the best for tonight against Newcastle. Yes. I think I'll be there along with Dan, I think, one of our contributors today, and even Everton. We wish them they need more luck for the rest of the season than anyone else, I think. This is our last podcast before the end of the year. Holly, do you have the date for the next one? I think it's the 19th of January, the next one. That's right. And we've got some very exciting special guests lined up, but we're not going to tell you about them yet until they're completely confirmed. Richard Morris, a friend of the show, has sent a message saying Happy Christmas to us all, and indeed to all of you, our audience. I think I've done all the housekeeping I need to do. I haven't got my note in front of me. Holly, is there anything else I normally say at this stage? No, that's all. I guess just Merry Christmas. That's the end. Well, Merry Christmas to all. Thanks very much. And we'll see you all at the next Scouse Science podcast. And we'll all say goodbye together. That's what we normally do after 3. 1, 2, 3. Goodbye. Bye.